he bought land south of the River Mersey. Here, in 1888, William Lever built his soap works. A year later, he started building a village to house his employees, which became known as Port Sunlight. He believed that good housing would ensure a happy and loyal workforce.
William Lever wanted clean, healthy living conditions for his workers, and he was determined that Port Sunlight would be the perfect location to bring up a family. And to this end, he personally oversaw all the planning of the village. He was something of a frustrated architect. He had a keen passion for building design, and that, coupled with a rising fortune at his disposal, led to some rather astonishing architecture.
Lever employed and worked in collaboration with nearly 30 different leading architects of his day. The result is that each block of houses has a different style and design approach. Some have an Old English or Elizabethan feel, with much use of black and white half-timbering. Others were built in the Flemish style, with bricks imported from Belgium. But you can also spot classical elements intermingling with Mediterranean crescents. All in all, between 1889 and 1914, 800 houses were built in an intoxicating mixture of styles. William Lever's concern for the welfare of his employees, however, wasn't just restricted to where his workers lived, but how they lived. Lever believed in strict Victorian principles, and he wished to raise the moral sensibilities of his workers. At the soap factory, the female workers finished at different times to the men, so they didn't leave the factory together. And this sense of Victorian propriety in keeping the sexes apart also applied to meal times.
This is the Gladstone Theatre. Now, originally, this was a restaurant for the male employees of the factory. The ladies, well, they were separate. They had their own restaurant just a few streets away. But first thing in the morning, on the way to work, the chaps would bring in their food here. So come lunchtime when they arrived, it could be preheated and warmed up by the staff. And if they didn't want hot food, they could always bring in their own cold packed lunch. See, it was all about choices, keeping the workers happy.
And here they are, opening up their picnic hampers and billy cans of stew. And you can just make out that the walls are lined with artwork.
The artwork that graced the walls were from William Lever's own personal art collection, probably put there to educate and civilise the men. And it seemed to work, because it was remarked upon in 1909 that proceedings were remarkably orderly. The caterer and his assistants had no difficulty in keeping down the horseplay and the spitting.
The hall was also used for stage plays, in which guise it still continues today. But there was also music and dancing for the villagers, the women being told not to spend more than 2 shillings on a dress, so nobody could outdo each other. Not all aspects of social engineering in the village were a success, though. The Bridge Inn opened in 1900 as a non-alcoholic temperance house, but the villagers felt it should have a licence. And although William Lever had serious misgivings, by 1903 a vote was held and it was carried by an overwhelming majority.
William Lever's vision, though, was about creating a better life for his workers and providing things which would make life a lot more pleasant. So he built schools, cottage hospital, swimming pool, concert halls, art galleries. The thing is, keep the workers happy and they'll do a much better job for you. It is the right philosophy. What I've got here is a fascinating photo album. It's a wonderful document of social history of what took place here in this village, organised events and trips out for the workers. And here's a photograph of the Science and Literary Society on a trip out to the loggerheads. It's the most wonderful scene, sitting on the side of a hill, look, having a cup of tea, all rather genteel. And on the other hand, you have something rather physical, water polo. Now, you have to be really strong to play that sport, but there's a lovely photograph of it. Lever encouraged groups that promoted science, art, literature and sport to come here. Because he was the son of a wholesale grocer, he believed in the power of self-improvement.
And one person who knows all about the benefits of growing up in Port Sunlight is John Spillits.
Hello, John.
Hi, Paul.
Pleased to meet you. Come and have a
Pleased to meet
seat.
you.
I find this fascinating. You must have seen this hundreds of times.
I've seen that and many other photographs of the history of the village, yes.
It's a brilliant window into the golden age of this
Yes,
village, isn't
yes,
it? Mind
it
you,
is.
there still is a golden age
Yes,
here.
oh yes.
Now, your family has a connection to this place that goes back 3 generations.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes, my grandfather volunteered in 1914 to fight in the First World War. He was one of the 700 volunteers from the soap factory who volunteered on the same day. And you can see from the war memorial back there that many of them didn't make it back. And
What happened to your grandfather?
he got killed in 1918
I'm
in
sorry
France.
to hear that.
Yes.
Brave young men. Brave
Yes.
young men. His name's on that monument.
And his name's on the war memorial. Yeah, what was so brilliant for me was that I'd never actually seen a photograph of my grandfather, and through the Port Sunlight Museum I now have a photograph of him, so that means a great deal to me.
Sure, it must have done. It must have done. Tell me a bit about your father. He worked at the factory, didn't he?
My dad worked at the factory from 1936 to 1979.
What did he do?
He was in the stores department, and I've actually got his long service watch there, which...
Look at that. Oh, yeah, I can read that. It says, presented by Lever Brothers, Port Sunlight Limited, to W.H. Spillett for good service, 1936 to 1961,
No,
is that?
51, I think it's 51. It's gone a bit tarnished
It has,
there,
hasn't it? It's got a scratch.
So to get a good service after 50
That
years...
is brilliant. You don't get that today, I bet.
Not many do it now.
So as a nipper, you use these facilities?
Used all of them. There was a boys' club.
Yeah.
There's an open-air swimming pool where the garden centre is now. And we all learned to swim there.
Yeah.
It was very cold. A local dance hall for
Concert
us.
halls, things like
Concert halls, everything, yes.
art galleries. Fantastic.
Yes. It was just amazing. We felt as though we lived in some sort of special little bubble, if you
Well, it is like utopia, isn't
Yes,
it? When you arrive
yes.
here, all of a sudden, it kind of makes you feel happy.
Yes.
It really does.
This is home. Port Sunlight is home.
Yeah, and a great place to live back then, and I'm sure a great place to live today.
Certainly
John,
is.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Welcome back to Wallasey Town Hall on the Wirral Peninsula.